Welcome to European Railway in Retrospect, issue number 3. We begin just to the north of the city of Luxembourg, on the line up to the Belgian border at Liege. The line serves a thriving commuter belt, and many of the trains during the peak rush hour were, and still are, formed of locomotive and coach sets, supplementing the usual two-car electric multiple units normally used on the line. Today, brand new Class 4000 electrics have taken over from the late 1950s vintage Class 36000s, such as seen here in the shape of 3617, calling at Turin station with the 1740 from Luxembourg to Ettelbruck. Following on behind is Class 55 diesel number 5540 on a service for Liege. At the junction at Kaltenbach, 3605 heads south with a service for the capital. The branch up to Wiltz is also operated by the standard 2-car electric units. Most of the blue liveried Class 55s that used to operate on this route have recently been stood down and are now in reserve, with complete withdrawal of the class expected by the year end. At Troyes-Vierge, 3612 heads for Gouvy in order to work a freight back to Bettembourg Yard. Finally, we see the 1908 departure from Liege as it pulls into the station behind 5519. Belgian Class 20 electrics now handle such services. The lines west of Erfurt through Neudeitendorf and onwards to Gotha were once part of the Deutsche Reichsbahn mainline through to the former border with West Germany near Bebra. Just 3 years after reunification, the DR was still using their extensive fleet of diesels to operate both mainline and local passenger services. We begin at the junction town of Neudeitendorf, just 6 kilometres to the west of Erfurt. Our first scene shows one of the 709 Class 232s, which were built for operation on the former DR network. Number 232046 accelerates its train away from the station whilst heading for Erfurt. 219159 is in charge of this train from Saalfeld. Despite the route being electrified to Arnstadt, electric trains were actually quite uncommon, and very rarely went past the station here at New Deitendorf. Seen on a service from Berlin is 112135. At this time, the Class 232s dominated passenger workings in the area. On 27th July 1994, number 232206 arrives with a service for Erfurt. In 2009, the majority of the remaining locomotives still in traffic are used on freight services, mainly in their old stamping grounds in the east of the country. This is a high-speed 232-215 with just a single van. In the right distance is a DR Class 142 electric, awaiting its next turn of duty, which is likely to be an eastbound freight service. (232-240) heads east through the station with an early evening inter-regional service for Erfurt. In the opposite direction comes 228-646 on a service for Arnstadt. The Class 228s were working out their last months in regular service during the time of our visit. Freight trains were seen one every hour. Here 232-216 heads east at 6 minutes to 7 in the evening. This is 232345, a locomotive currently allocated to Rostock depot. Finally in this sequence, and to break the Class 232 monopoly, we see 228780 on a service from Arnstadt. We now move some 16 kilometres further west to the town of Gotha, which during our visit was in the middle of a massive engineering project as part of the electrification of the line. 232530 arrives with a train from Bebra on 27th July 1994. On an engineer's train, Erfurt base 202-302 heads into the local yard. Class 202 were common in this area. Class 772 four-wheeled rail buses and trailers dominate this view of the roundhouse, including one in the original red livery. Also seen on the right in this locomotive lineup was then fully operational 231164, part of a class that were earmarked for early withdrawal following reunification of the German rail network. Two 32060 departs with a local train for Eisenach. This oil train is on its way to a factory at Emblemen. Trains such as this still run today, with Class 232 normally in charge. However, in this view we have a Class 202, number 202-487, piloting Class 231, number 231072. Finally, 232-614 arrives with a service from Bebre to Erfurt. It was amazing to see that these 3,000 horsepower machines were regularly turned out to haul such comparatively short trains. All this, of course, is now just history. The main line between Paris and Belfort is still the only non-electrified main line radiating from the capital city. Today, motive power is re-engined Class CC 72-100 diesels, which operate a number of services along the route. When the new, almost parallel TGV Est line was recently opened, a number of services on this route were withdrawn. In busier times, we called into Langres station. A CC 72043 arrives with a service from Paris in July 1996. In the opposite direction comes 72080, a locomotive which entered traffic on 29th of March 1973 and which still operates on this line. A pair of BB 66,000 diesels head empty mineral water pallet wagons to Vital. Finally, 72031 heads east. The railways in the Czech Republic still offer a wide variety of motive power and train types, although a few classes of locomotive and multiple units have been withdrawn over the years. On 23rd of August 1998, we visited the junction town of Vistati, which lies around 20 kilometres to the east of the capital, Prague. The town is on the electrified secondary main line to the north of the country, as well as branch lines to the east. During our visit, Class 122 electrics were the most common on freight services. Here 122086 arrives from the west with a short trip freight. One 22032 arrives with southbound car empties. Class 753 diesels once totalled 408 in number. Today, those remaining in the Czech fleet have either been modified, sold abroad, or withdrawn, with only a handful now remaining in use. Just 6 examples are in operation with Czech cargo for use around Liberec. This is 753306. Two Skoda designs are on view here, one with metal wheels and one with rubber. Class 853 units date from 1969 and totalled 35 in number. This is 853007 arriving with the 849 from Prague to Turnov. (122.046), sporting an attractive two-tone green livery, rounds the curve from the south with a lengthy mixed freight. During our Monday morning stopover, no less than 10 freights were seen in just 1 hour. Finally, 122030 heads this train of northbound empty coal hoppers, bound for the mines around Ushti. Around 15 kilometres to the west of Vrštati, on the main line north of Prague, is the town of Kralupy nad Vltavou. Built in the mid-1960s, this Class 451 unit is one of a once 51-strong fleet that work local trains around Prague. The station here forms the northern limit of one of the commuter lines, which serves the city. This is Unit 451080. The route is part of the Dresden to Prague mainline. This is German 180-009 on the 0646 from Berlin. Finally, we see 123012 on southbound coal hoppers. Turin is an important railway junction in the northern part of Italy. It forms vital links with the west coast of the country and northwards into France as well as east towards Milan. The main yard is situated on the western side of the city. Here we see Class 652, number 652039, as it heads a westbound train for the nearby container terminal. Class 652 electrics were introduced from the late 1980s. To the south of the city's suburbs, 444068 is seen in charge of the 1110 Turin to Napoli intercity service. One of 14 Class D145s allocated to Turin, this class member is on a trip freight for Cambiano. Class 645s were developments of the Class 636 and were used entirely on heavy freights. Most are now withdrawn. To the east of the city, on the line to Santia, Class 633, number 633107, is on the rear of this push-pull operated train bound for Turin. This is diesel 445-1067. Approaching the camera is 645041 on a westbound freight at just after 20 past 1. We are now just outside of Chivasso, some 20 kilometres to the east of Turin. Heading in a westbound direction is 633239 on a trainload of steel coil. In the opposite direction, 633082 is on the rear of this train bound for Milan. Services on this line were running at half-hourly intervals. In their early days, the Class 633s were used extensively in the northern part of Italy, on anything from heavy freight, intercity passenger, and here local stopping services. Finally, we see a classic Italian freight, headed by 636-160, one of a batch introduced to traffic in 1953. These locomotives weigh in at just over 100 tons and have a rating of around 2,500 horsepower. The stations at Quevy and Jaumont are both on routes radiating from Aulnoy in northeastern France and close to or just inside the border with Belgium. We begin at the once strategic border station at Quevy in May 1998. Since border crossing controls were abolished in the European Union, the station has lost its customs function and now acts as a locomotive changeover point. Number 26003 is seen arriving with northbound tanks. Class BB 66,000 diesels in the area were often employed on feeder services to and from Aulnoy Yard. In this view, BB 66223 and 251 have just brought in a rake of coal hoppers. We now travel the 10 kilometres or so across to Jaumont. 26195 enters the yard from the south with a train bound for Belgium. Local passenger services in the area were largely in the hands of BB 16500. Here number 16507 heads a service from Lille. This locomotive was withdrawn from traffic on 15th of December 2003. (66201 and 66195) restart this trainload of steel coil. There were around 3 freight trains per hour during the time we visited. (26195) has come off its train and heads back light engine to Aulnoy. The yard acts in a similar way to the one at Gotha, where trains can have the French or the Belgian voltages switched through the overhead wires. To avoid problems, locomotives drop their pantographs as they approach the station and glide to a halt. This is 26163. VB 12,000 electrics were a common sight here before their complete withdrawal at the end of 1999. This is 12051 of the 1217 freight from Sommer. Class X4500 diesel units are currently being reduced in numbers, as they are being replaced throughout France. But in 1998 they were still commonplace. This example arrives in the bay platform. Meanwhile, having already visited Quevy earlier in the day, numbers 66251 and 223 arrive with a long train of steel pipes. Finally, after arriving with its train, VB 12051 glides through the station with pantographs down, with just enough momentum to reach the platform ends where the 25 kV is available from the overhead. What better way to end this programme with such a classic French design? Thank you for watching this edition of European Railway in Retrospect.